I was thinking about this, and I think there are a couple of themes that are important here in terms of bringing this material to students. So in no particular order, one of the things that is really remarkable about the archaeology of this region, about the native history here, is how far back it goes. There is real depth here. And I'm going to be talking about one site in particular that that illustrates that. We're going back almost 13,000 years when we talk about native history here. That's a lot of time in a region where most of the towns are not much more than 200 years old. So there's quite a bit there. And I think that's important to know. I think as a citizen of any area, just knowing that basic thing, when do people first come here, is crucial. The archaeological sites that are here are a real local resource, and one of the things I've been successful with is when I'm talking to people, I say, look, you know these places, you know where these sites are, you know these settings. They're not somewhere far away and remote and separate from you. They're here. You're walking over them, you're driving by them, they are part of your world. And people seem to connect to that. Okay, if they can place these things in the world that they're familiar with. And you can certainly do that in this region. And I'm going to be talking about 4 sites in the Monadnock region that give you a sense of how you might approach that. Okay? Number 3, okay, this is an interesting, complicated story. And one of the common traps that people fall into, especially non-native people, is thinking that there is a Native American past. And so the question will be, what was Abenaki culture like before the Europeans got here? Give me the answer to that. They were here for 13,000 years. And that question sort of implies that in all of that time there was no change. There was no dynamism. There was just sort of static culture waiting for the Europeans to get here and tip over the apple cart. And that's not true. Okay? There is a story here. And in archaeology, we are able to see some reflections of the changes and the dynamics of native societies. But you have to tell it, I think, as a narrative. It has a beginning point. Right? And it goes through time and things happen and there are, mysteries to solve and so on and so forth. And it brings us up to the present, and it's a story that is still continuing, which my fellow presenters are going to talk about today. Number 4, there is also, at the same time that I say there was change in dynamism, there is also remarkable continuity here. We have one of the oldest sites in New England about 4 miles from where we're sitting right here. And there is no evidence in the archaeological record that at any time from that point on, almost 13,000 years ago, up to the present, that this region was ever depopulated, that the native people here left or that they were pushed out by some other group of Native Americans or something of this sort. There is remarkable continuity, and you see it in places in the Monadnock region, like down around Sawyer's Crossing in Swansea, where you have artifacts that show you 13,000 years of continuous occupation. So there's both a lot of change and a real story to tell, but also a really, really deep attachment to the land that's here. Okay? And the other theme, and Jenna alluded to the book I wrote last year, or came out with last year, and that was a good exercise for me because it allowed me to sort of step back and see a big picture I usually don't get to see when I'm, telling fibs to people about whether I'm going to be able to meet deadlines and things like that. And as I was writing this book and talking about the sites here, I say, wait, I'm seeing the same thing here as I'm seeing here and the same thing here as here. And one of the themes that really came out, and it goes back to the beginning, was that the native people here were not an isolated Stone Age community cut off from the rest of the world. They were part of a very big universe, and they had connections that stretched hundreds and sometimes thousands of miles across North America. And it's not just that they were getting influences from other places, but those influences were going the other way as well. And I think you can see those connections and start to think about them, and not just say, okay, there was this isolated little Abenaki world that didn't change for 12,000 years, and that's what we need to capture. So it's much more interesting, much more complicated than I realized when I first got into that. So